She was a part of the attack at the Capitol, and then she came back to St. Louis only to tear apart a family.
Ever since the party of law and order and the king of criminals, Donald Trump, unleashed his gang of rabid Jan 6ers on the world, there's been utter chaos across the United States and even Canada.
Anthony Vo is supposed to be behind bars in the U.S. Instead, he's hitting the slopes in Whistler, BC.
It's a veritable who's who of criminals, a clown car full of everything from PDF files to crazy drunks. Multiple of these stories end in gunfights. I've got a wild collection of stories about Jan 6ers here, who either end up back in prison or much worse. But before we dive into it, go ahead and like the video and double check that you're subscribed. While Trump is here in America deporting damn near every brown person he sees, this fleeing insurrectionist is getting deported by Canada.
Anthony Vo is supposed to be behind bars in the U.S. Instead, he's hitting the slopes in Whistler, BC, hoping U.S. President Donald Trump will pardon him and others involved in the January 6th insurrection.
He's already made too many promises in the public spotlight that it would look really bad if he didn't. And he's a man of his word, so.
Vo and his mother were among hundreds of Americans who stormed the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. Last year, the 32-year-old was convicted of 4 misdemeanors and sentenced to 9 months in jail. Rather than reporting to prison in June, Vo packed up his snowboard and headed north to claim asylum in Canada. Experts say it'll be a tough case to make.
So we'll always give people the benefit of the doubt and hear their claim and evaluate it. So I'm not surprised that they're hearing it. That's how our process works. We give everybody a fair hearing. But I would be extremely surprised if this was a successful claim.
In his asylum claim, Vo says he was targeted, persecuted, maltreated, arrested, subjected to unfair trial, and even sentenced because of his political beliefs.
I love that he says that he feels politically persecuted. These people always turn into freaking Malcolm X as soon as they around and find out and end up in prison.
I know a lot of people disagree with me being here, but I've also received a lot of support from people here, and I'm really grateful to be here.
He's still waiting for a hearing date, which could take up to a year. Vo's plan is to be home for the start of the Lunar New Year at the end of the month, but only if he gets a pardon by then. If not, he will continue to fight for asylum in Canada.
Just after doing this ridiculous puff piece, this guy was arrested by Canadian Border Services and held ever since. After Trump gave him the pardon, now he wants to withdraw his asylum claim and come home. I hope they keep him for as long as possible in whatever the Canadian version of the gulag is. The rest of these stories are a little bit more tragic, so here's your content warning. Seeing as Trump and his goons are the party of irresponsible drunks, I guess we can expect more than one of these Jan 6ers to be drunks behind the wheel too. Unfortunately, sometimes the rest of us have to pay the price.
She was a part of the attack at the Capitol, and then she came back to St. Louis only to tear apart a family. Tonight, justice comes for those hurt by Emily Hernandez.
After January 6th, Emily Hernandez ended up driving down I-44 drunk. She killed a mother.
And tonight, Hernandez is prison bound after 3 years since that accident.
What she did at the Capitol, like, I'm sure, that would have had some effect as to if she was convicted in that situation, like properly not being out on the road, then, obviously would have changed things. But I think ultimately it speaks volumes to her actions and her regard for the justice system.
Vicky's family said they wanted Hernandez to see significant time behind bars after she pleaded guilty, coincidentally, on Election Day last year. Wednesday, Judge Ryan Helfrich emphasized the weight of his decision, saying probation was not appropriate in this case. Instead, he sentenced Hernandez to 10 years in prison for killing Vicky and 7 years for injuring Ryan.
Finally, justice is served, because clearly, if somebody takes part of an insurrection at the word of Donald Trump, they probably should have received more than 30 days in prison, and they almost definitely shouldn't be trusted behind the wheel of a car. The Trump administration is willing to deport every migrant they can get their hands on because one migrant committed a horrible act and killed Laken Riley. They argue that she would still be alive if the justice system hadn't let go that migrant. Well, this poor woman would still be alive if these walking, talking STDs called Jan 6ers were sent to prison for longer than it takes to get over chlamydia. And these people are not just a danger to our lives, they're a danger to our kids. Not one, but 2 Jan 6ers have been caught being PDF files since being released from prison.
New tonight, a Mint Hill man first arrested on charges related to the riots at the Capitol on January 6th is back behind bars. He's now accused of making child porn. It's a story we first broke this afternoon on WBTV.com. David Daniel was arrested a second time in September. The FBI says it found pictures on the cell phone they seized from him during his first arrest.
A man who was pardoned after having been convicted for his actions at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, is now wanted by authorities in Texas. The Harris County District Attorney says 36-year-old Andrew Taki is charged with online solicitation of a minor. An FBOP spokesperson told Houston Public Media it complied with Trump's pardon order, which it interpreted to immediately release all individuals on a list of people who received pardons. Harris County says it will now have to use significant resources to track Taki down.
You know what Kendrick Lamar said? Those predators move in flocks, and those who aren't sex pests are absolute violent lunatics. One Gen 6er was killed by police after getting into a fight with the cops during a traffic stop.
This is State Road 14 in rural Jasper County. It's the road where Matthew Huddle was pulled over on Sunday just after 4 p.m. Indiana State Police said Huddle had a gun during the traffic stop, but they have not said where that gun was or if he pointed it at the Jasper County Sheriff deputy while resisting arrest. In 2023, Huddle was sentenced to 6 months in prison and a year of supervised release after pleading guilty to entering and remaining in a restricted building for his actions on January 6th. President Trump pardoned him of that conviction last week. Indiana Department of Corrections records show Huddle was not a stranger to the criminal justice system. In 2010, he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for battery. And in 2020, he was convicted of felony DUI because he had prior DUI convictions on his record.
One Gen 6er who was also a QAnon conspiracist got in a shootout when she was being served foreclosure papers and unfortunately passed away.
King County records show the home was in foreclosure. After the men arrived, police say the homeowner walked out with a shotgun.
And caller's now saying he shot back at her and that she's on the ground.
One of the subjects fired the firearm.
A deadly wound to the chest. The King County Medical Examiner's Office identifying the woman as 57-year-old Tamara Towers Perry.
We just stormed the Congress, and I'm going to tell you right now,
better known as Dr. Tammy, a doctor who posted video from the Capitol on January 6th, sparked outrage within the medical community. Perry eventually lost her license.
I've seen her before and we walked past each other, but no speaking.
Neighbors say they mainly knew Perry by brief interactions and by her home, easily identified by the QAnon display in the window.
She started yelling at me, "Are you the police? Are you military?" I think it was because of the blue uniform. I'm like, no, I'm just airline and just walking by, but she just was very paranoid.
As much as Donald Trump likes to complain about South American countries emptying their prisons onto our streets, it turns out he was just complaining about the competition. Re-electing Donald Trump has been a lot like Gotham City electing Joker as the mayor. Of course, the first thing he's going to do is let all of his cronies out of Arkham Asylum. Mind you, we didn't even cover all of the stories that I found. There's plenty of Jan 6ers out there who are wanted for all kinds of other charges. But stupid is as stupid does. So I'm sure eventually they'll all end up back where they belong, in prison. I'm Tony Hinderman with Really American, and I'll catch you next time.